Okay, no, I have to do my weird look now.
Okay, do your weird look now.
Okay, I'm going to be normal now. So Wayne, congratulations on your book.
Thank you very much. Thank you very much.
And I heard you had a wonderful launch. Yay.
Yay, I had a launch of the new book, Killing Winter. It was awesome.
Can we start right at the beginning of what was the spark for this book?
The spark, I believe, was an editor of mine. I used to work for in a small town paper, and I worked for him for 2 years, but I had no idea he had a gambling addiction. So then one day he came back and he said, I went to play poker with some friends. And then it progressed further, and next thing you know, he stole the company van, the petty cash, and took off, leaving behind his wife and his 2 kids. And then I moved to Edmonton, and he would show up at my house every so often and sleep on my couch and borrow $20. And then he sort of disappeared, and that's where the story came from. Whatever happened to him, and that's where I built Leo based on that. Whatever happened to my editor, and that's how Leo came from. And then I just started building the stories from there. Once you get the character, the stories just come. You can put a character anywhere, but once you get a good character, it's perfect. So that's the genesis of the whole idea.
Okay, and Leo's a strong, compelling character. And you draw a parallel between him and you on the cover, that you're both. So how much do you identify with Leo then, yourself?
Well, there's bits of Leo I put in with myself. There's always the question is like, where do you end and Leo begin? Because, you know, Leo does some weird stuff. And people look at me funny when they read the book. Did you do that? Did you do that? So, well, Leo has some basic, background things. We're both Native and French Canadian. We both grew up on army bases. Some of the background things in the story about Leo's life happened to me. However, I jazz them up for fictional purposes. But Leo goes further than I do. So there's a bit of Leo in me. Like most writers, there's a bit of you in each character. But I just sort of stopped the line, and it's always a gray area where Leo and I end. But I know he's his own person, though. He takes a life of his own all the time.
Yeah, he is, and he has this lone hero wanting justice kind of thing going on for sure. That has that character has a long and wonderful literary tradition. Were you influenced by other writers in building Leo?
I think the biggest writer is influenced not just by character but style was Walter Mosley, the great crime writer who wrote the Easy Rawlins things, and his character is a African-American man who starts in the 50s, and the books progress to the 60s. And they're crime fiction, but at the same time there's stories about race. So I wanted to bring that into my books. There'd be crime fiction in a sense, but there are also stories about something else.
About race.
So that's, and also the style, he has a sort of simple style that just sort of flows forward. I sort of try to emulate, but not copy his style. So.
There's a really interesting morality in this book to me. Leo seems to be the kind of character who's always gauging where he stands morally, and there's this moral relativity throughout the whole book. So he talks about getting his job as a scab, but not as bad a scab as the insiders who didn't go on the picket line, and so on. So I'd love to hear more of that. And I guess my first question is goodness completely unavailable to Leo? Is he wanting to be a good person, or does he like being on the outside? I think
the main thing about Leo, he's a survivor. And when you're a survivor, you do a lot of things to survive. I mean, you said, well, I need a job, I'll go in there and be a scab as this person. But then you sort of rationalize it while you're doing it. Well, I'm not as bad as, like you said, not as bad as he do. So I think that's the main thing behind Leo. He's a survivor. He's trying to do things to help him survive so he can keep going the next day, so he doesn't fall off the edge of the earth or whatever happens to him. So that's the main thing. So if you're in that mode, good and bad are very gray, and that's I think for most human beings. We're not black and white, good and bad. We have a big gray area of what we call moral and amoral and immoral, and for some people it's this way, some people's that way. So I also want to explore that. The one thing I wanted to do with Leo is when I created him and when I saw that the things he was doing, because a lot of things he's doing on his own. So a lot of, when you're a writer, you think your character is to do something, but then he goes this way and that way. And what I wanted, in a sense, is for people to like him, despite the fact that he does some strange stuff. I mean, he has some goodness about him, and he has some badness about him, but I want overall people like him, find him compelling, and want to know what happens next to him. And for some people, I also wanted some people to cheer for him, but then realize that they shouldn't be.
Yeah, yeah.
And then that makes you think more of where you are in your morality. So
Yeah.
that was the whole point of certain things in the book.
When I say, you know, good versus bad character, I'm not meaning to say he's either. But what's interesting is that he seems to point to what he thinks is good. You know, this is what a good person would do. I'm not there, but I'm not as bad as that. You know, so it's this shifting constantly he does.
And I think all humans do that. I think we shift sort of this way. You know, I'm not as bad as these guys. I mean, I don't want to get to specifics, but the election right now is like, you know, it's like we're going this way, but okay, maybe these guys aren't as bad as we thought we were because we don't want to go that way or whatever way you want to go. But I think we're all like that, humans. We sort of shift based on our reaction to certain things. I mean, we try to be as good as we can, but you know, we're only humans.
I think everybody's of a certain age is familiar with the capacity to rationalize just about anything.
Oh, I think so, yeah.
So when you say Leo would do things that surprised you, the bank robberies, did that surprise you?
That did surprise me because he was coming in from seeing the body and I knew he had to do something for risk-taking behavior. I didn't know what it was. And then I sort of had a sense of where he was in the city, and I knew there were certain strip malls in the city, and what would they have? First, he was going to go in the convenience store and do something, but then convenience stores aren't a good place for that kind of stuff because the people who work there will fight back. So that's why he went into a bank, because banks have this sort of they have a strategy on how to deal with a bank robber. Just give them the money. You don't fight, so it doesn't matter what bank you go into. So that's why I figured he would try that and get away with it.
Yeah, I have to say it was strangely satisfying as a reader to know that he always, you know, had this access to money no matter what happened to him.
Yeah,
well, that's practical.
That's good. Yeah, he was. I mean, but it wasn't for the money. Like it's not with his gambling. It's not really just for the money. It's for the thrill, or just to. He needs this sort of thing. He needs to fulfill. So, and so that's where it comes from. So, if he's worried if he gambles too much, he'll lose his, you know, where he is. So he robs banks to. Offset that, not knowing, or also realizing that that's also just as bad.
The outsider position of, because I see him as an outsider. Is that,
oh yeah, he's an outsider, obviously, yeah.
So that position, do you think that's a position that writers necessarily occupy?
Myself, no, I don't myself. I mean, I'm slightly different. I work at home. I have a lot of books and I don't have a real job, but I'm still the same sort of, I have a wife and a daughter. I take my daughter to school. I hang out at community events. I coach soccer. I'm still that kind of stuff. I mean, partly we are outside, but partly we still fit into everything else. I mean, there's also writers who are different than I am. We're very individual people.
Right.
Like yourself.
So it sounds like you haven't taken on that mantle of that romantic mantle of the alienated.
Oh, I've never been alienated by it.
Yeah.
I mean, some people have too much angst when they're, the artistic angst. And pretty much I have to work for a living, so I have to get this stuff done, and I can't be too much angstful about it. I mean, I do have times when I sort of figure out where am I going with it, but then I work through it because I have a deadline and it has to get done. I mean, that sort of helps that I was a working writer for a long time, so either do it or you get laid off. So,
and the practicality of that sort of matter-of-factness seems to really be clear in your book, and there's just so much detail. Especially, I love reading about Edmonton landmarks and Edmonton events.
Cool.
Can you talk a little bit about that? Did you have a kind of methodology of including local events and icons, or how did you approach that?
Well, I just sort of approached it by where would Leo go if he even had a job, but where was he living before he had the job? And so how would he get home and what would he bypass? I mean, and then of course he had to bypass a casino because he's downtown, and then I was deal with that. I mean, certain things have changed since I've written the book, and certain things have changed since I've written my second book. Buildings have been knocked down, new buildings have been built up, new neighborhoods are getting all fancy up again. But I just sort of moved things in, and certain events, as the overtime event, that kind of stuff. It's just sort of things that came up as I was writing the book, how he would deal with these things and how they would discuss certain events that happened in the past or certain things that happened in Edmonton, just to give a sense of the city and things that journalists would deal with.
Did you ever feel conflicted between Leo's experience and your own opinions? And I'm thinking about the treatment of the Edmonton Police Service here. Yeah. So Leo's got some serious bones to pick.
He does. And I have Some too, but not as much as Leo. I mean, pretty much every event that I wrote dealing with the police, except for one, is based on a true event. So that's the thing I have. It's like, I'm not making this stuff up. I'm just putting it in a fictional book, but they're pretty much true events. So it's one thing I wanted to point out. Yeah.
And how was that for you, putting those events in? Can you talk? Did you have any qualms at all?
No, actually, I didn't have qualms at all. I just it just sort of came natural with the other stuff when I'm writing about when he's robbing the banks. It's like something happens, and so he wants to. I drew on my history, my knowledge of the current events in the city, and just put that in there, just as a matter of fact. I mean, I probably, you know, I'm disappointed in how the Edmonton Police Service has turned out in the last 20 years, because it used to be fantastic, but I'm not as angry as Leo is about him, because he's had different experiences with them than I have. So
yeah, of course.
Yeah.
I want to ask you about one point that made me uncomfortable, and that's the connection to Aliana White. So you use the name Aliana White, and it's of course to something else that happened.
Yeah.
And there seems to be a kind of division between murdered women who got media attention and murdered women who did not get media attention.
Yeah.
Can you talk about that a little? I understand how important it is to bring attention to the fact that there was a serial killer out there who was killing Aboriginal women, but to me, there was this uncomfortable division made. Can you just talk about what your decision was there?
Well, there was, because one of the issues I wanted to bring in is that the number is anywhere between 500 to 800 missing or murdered Aboriginal women in the country. All these cases are unsolved, and we're not doing anything about it. We're just sort of sitting around. People talk about it, but there's no government commissions, there's no real coordinating of police forces or anything like that. I mean, Vancouver, it's going through the Picton inquiry, which is going through, it was a huge, you know, thing about all these murdered women, most of them Aboriginal, that no one decided to investigate. However, if a suburban housewife, or, you know, white worker or something like that, Caucasian worker, is, you know, missing or murdered, everything gets excited. There's, you know, helicopters and there's like things on the news. But if an Aboriginal woman goes missing in the street, we don't even hear about it unless they find her body 3 weeks ago. So I wanted to bring that issue, which I know made some people uncomfortable, but it's part of what's actually going on. It should make you uncomfortable. I mean, there's actually a thing in the U.S. that some media person come out called the I'm not sure what it's actually called, but it's called the missing white woman syndrome, where a white woman is missing and all the media freak out and get all excited about it. We have to find her. But if there's a missing ethnic woman of some type, like an African American or a Native woman or something like that, or a Latino woman, it's like nothing happens. So I just wanted to bring that up and point that out and make people feel uncomfortable that we have a different reaction to that than.
Is there not then a risk, though, of creating a division within a horrible situation, which takes away from attention to the whole problem? Aliana White is as dead as the Aboriginal.
Yeah, she is too. Yeah,
right?
she is as dead, and it's just is a tragic thing. But I think it's our reaction to it is different. I mean, a dead person is dead person, whether it's a woman or a man. I mean, women suffer violence, men suffer violence, but this book was about Native women who suffer violence and who die and don't get enough attention to it. So I think it's our reaction to the violence or the events that is the thing we should look at, not the actual event, because the event is tragic regardless of it, but our reaction is totally different depending on the ethnic background of the person.
Your book has a great deal of social commentary, and we can only talk so long. We can go on a big discussion about this, and I'd like to talk to you more about it later. But in terms of the social commentary, is there what drew you most to writing? Was it the pleasure in telling fictional stories, or are you mainly a social commentator, or is it a combination? You don't have to choose.
It's a combination. It just happens. Like I love to write regardless of fiction and nonfiction. And then when I'm writing fiction, stuff just comes out about social commentary. I don't make a point of doing. When I started these books, I wasn't going to make a point of talking about Aboriginal women and the missing women. But as I started writing, it just sort of came out naturally because the character, Grace, who was murdered, is an Aboriginal woman. So what happens to them? The second book, A Killing Winter, is about the death of an Aboriginal man.
Right.
And how did he get murdered and how that happened? It deals with native gangs on the other side. And so it's just whatever happens naturally when I start writing. And I'm very organic that way. I have no really plan of what's going to happen when I write. I have the character and I have sort of ideas in my head and I just go forward and I'll just let it go wherever it goes. Sometimes it takes me where I'm not expecting. Usually it's a great place, so that's what I love about it. Yeah.
I want to ask you about this particular award.
Sure.
The Alberta Readers Choice Award. It's a new award.
Yeah.
The winner will be chosen by the public. Do you have a sense of what effect this might have on our literary landscape in the province?
I really like the fact that it's open to all Alberta writers right now. That's fantastic that they've done that, because a lot of Alberta writers are published outside the province. So it's a great way of bringing attention to Alberta writers, to Albertans, because we pay attention to Alberta writers. Alberta's a great writing place. Edmonton's a great writing community, but sometimes we forget that we have a lot of great writers here. I mean, Edmonton, I always say, is one of the best literary communities in the city. I mean, if the music scene in Edmonton was having as much success as the literary scene, we'd be the next Seattle or the next Montreal, the next big thing in music. But this brings more attention to that kind of stuff. That we have a lot of successful, great, and diverse artists. Different writers. I mean, all the books in this thing, they're totally different. And the writers are totally different people. And they're all Edmontonians, and it's fantastic that I'm sorry it's all Edmontonians. I know we want to bring some Alberta people into it, but just the way the ball bounces.
That's the way it goes.
That's the way it goes.
Yeah.
So, and I'm looking forward to, I know most of the writers, so I'm looking forward to hanging out and talking about their books and having a good time. And yeah, I hope one of us wins.
Thanks so much. Anything
Jocelyn?
else you'd like to say about your book?
No, I'm glad that people at Edmonton really like the book, even though it's not always a positive view of the city. Edmontonians were appreciative that I wrote about the city and mentioned parts that they liked, and even talked about some of the dark sides of the city, because there are dark sides of Edmonton, but there are also good sides. So
we're capable of complexity here.
We're complex people, so I just wanted to bring that out. Yeah, and it's fantastic that it got published, and there's another book coming out, and hopefully there'll be a third.
Great.
Yeah.
Thank you so much.
Thanks, Jocelyn.
Okay.
Thank you.